You're listening to the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I'm sharing with you how I'm personally showing up for my business, even while dealing with the exhaustion of being pregnancy, and how you can get through tough seasons of your life without having to give up on your dreams. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, a registered dietitian, nutrition business coach, and online entrepreneur with over 10 years of experience in online business. And I'm here to show you everything I've learned about creating a life and a business that nourishes you. On this podcast, we'll talk about the lifestyle habits, practical strategies, mindset shifts, and leaps of faith required to build a healthy body, a powerful mind, a strong spirit, and a successful business. Hey there, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, and today I want to talk about something that has been on my mind for a few months, and it's something that I see coming up in a lot of other people's lives, whether it's somebody that I'm working with in one of my programs like the Nutrition Business Accelerator, or even people that I've spoken to about working with me and my team, and it wasn't the right time for them. And they just felt like there's too much going on. I have too much stuff that's in the way of me taking action in my business right now and learning, and I'll come back later and do it. And it's been an interesting couple of months for me, as I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, know. I am pregnant. I am about 3 months away from my due date at the time of this recording. And it's been quite the journey so far, between being super nauseous and food averse for my first couple of months to the last couple of months having a lot of fatigue and physical discomfort with the change that my body is going through. It's not been an easy time for me to keep showing up and serving my clients, working with my team, doing things like this podcast. And the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because, like I said, I am pretty confident that a lot of you out there listening have had an experience like this before. And if you haven't, then you're going to have an experience like this at some point, where you have a lot of stuff going on that's preventing you from showing up the way that you want to show up in your business and in your life, and you have to figure out how to deal with it. So I know not everybody is going to go through pregnancy for a variety of reasons. Maybe you've already been pregnant before and maybe it was a great experience, maybe it was a really challenging experience. But the fact is that none of us get to go through life without challenges that get in the way of our ability to, do what we want to do, to show up with the energy that we want to show up with. And what I really want to talk about today is what to do when you're in a season like that. Because I think it's really easy. Well, maybe I shouldn't say really easy. I find it easy to take action and do new things and create content and all the things that my business needs me to do. I find it a lot easier to do when my energy is good. When my energy is not good, and in this particular season, I have no control over that. It's not a matter of eating better or sleeping more or anything like that. I don't necessarily feel like I can do the things that I want to do the way that I want to, just being honest. And I had shared about this on Instagram I guess it was yesterday from the day that I'm recording this. It would have been a couple weeks ago by the time y'all are hearing this. But I was sharing how pregnancy has been a tough time for me as a business owner to do the things that I want to do. And for me, a lot of times it comes down to doing the stuff that I want rather than the stuff that has to happen. And we're going to talk about that. But it's definitely been a weird experience for me to not feel a lot of motivation to do the things that I typically like to do, between running my business, being active, challenging myself mentally, all the things that I typically enjoy and spend a lot of time doing in my normal day-to-day life has been affected by physically not feeling well. And like I said, I know that many of you have had that experience before. Maybe you're having it right now. And if you haven't, I'm sure there's going to be a time where it does happen to you, where your energy is not what it used to be, or something is causing your focus to be distracted from your business, from the things that you like to accomplish in your life. And I want to talk today about what to do when you're going through that. So to be fair, I'm in it right now. So, I know sometimes that people will argue that you shouldn't share something that you're going through when it's happening. I don't know if I agree with that. I do think, waiting until you've gotten through it and sharing the lesson on the other side can be valuable. But in a circumstance like the one that I'm going through, I don't think it's necessarily going to just resolve itself and then boom, it's gone. And now I can talk about how I got through this period of time of, energy depletion. I haven't had a baby yet, so, I'll share with you guys in a few months how it's going. But from what I hear, having a newborn isn't exactly your highest energy period either. And so for me, if I was going to try to wait to share with you guys what I'm learning through this process until my energy is back to normal and I'm not dealing with it anymore, we might be waiting a little bit. We might be waiting until, end of the year, next year. And that's being hopeful that my energy will recover decently well and that having a newborn won't totally wreck me as far as energy is concerned. But long story short, I don't know when this is going to change, right? I don't know when I'm going to start feeling better. And honestly, that's part of the point of today's podcast is to talk about what to do when you don't know when the end is coming of a specific circumstance like fatigue. See, you can already hear my brain's a little bit struggling with words, which has been a pretty common symptom I've been experiencing for the last few months. But all I was going to say is sometimes we're in seasons that we don't have an end date for. And honestly, I would say more often than not, we don't have an end date for it. I mean, if the last 2 years has taught us anything, I'm recording this in March of 2022. We're 2 years into 2 weeks to slow the spread, right? I mean, I'm kind of saying that a little facetiously, but if we were talking to ourselves in 2020 and we were oh, we just got to hunker down for 2 weeks and, make some sacrifices and all of that, our mindset around that was obviously ill-informed, unfortunately. And if somebody had come to us and said, well, actually, this is going to be something that's going on for at least 2 years and your life is going to be impacted by it for at least 2 years, I think we'd have a different perspective on what was about to happen and what the season was going to be and how we were going to need to accommodate it. So I know that everybody went through that. That's kind of a universal experience in the world at this point. I mean, maybe not every single place in the entire world, but I'd say most places had disruption to daily life for at least longer than 2 weeks. And so this is an example for me personally where I'm in a season where I don't know what the end point is and I don't know when things are going to go back to normal. And the fact is that I can't just say, you know what, I'm just going to not work and just going to lay around and sleep and do all the things that would feel really good right now with the fatigue that I'm having. So like I said, a lot of times the seasons that we go through are not defined to the point where we know, oh, this is when it's going to end and I'll just make it to that point and then it's going to be over. Because even in my circumstance, having the baby doesn't necessarily mean the season's over, and it could mean that the season's going to get more challenging. I don't know what's coming. So long story short, my feeling is, yes, sometimes it can be helpful to wait to share with your audience the lessons that you've learned after you've been through an experience. But the current experience that I'm going through and the specifics around this experience, I don't think is helpful to wait until it's done because I don't know when it's going to be done. And I also think there's things that I can share with you that are relevant to how I'm feeling currently in the moment that may not really come to my mind to share with you when I'm out of it. Because I don't know about you guys, but as soon as I'm out of a problem, a lot of times it's really fast that I just forget that I was in that problem. Like even the nausea and food aversions I was having in the first trimester, which were awful and literally was just making every single day unpleasant and frustrating and just not exciting for me to wake up in the morning and be like, great, another day feeling like this. As soon as that went away, I started taking for granted even just being able to eat food because I'm not in it anymore, right? So if I was going to come on this podcast and be like, how to deal with feeling nauseous when you're pregnant and I'm not feeling nauseous anymore, I don't know if I would have the same advice for you. I don't know if I would have the same perspectives, the same value to share. Not that it wouldn't be valuable, but it just would be different. So that's why I want to come on and talk to you about this current season that I'm in, the one that I don't know when it's ending. It's been going on for I think like 5 months at this point, feeling this way, more or less, on and off. And I know that a lot of you have felt this way for some reason, whether it's pregnancy or something else. I know that a lot of you have had this experience. And as someone who is an entrepreneur, business owner, someone who's doing things in their life that they can't just phone it in every single day, we have to be able to keep showing up for our business, for our life, even when we're exhausted. So I have 4 different things that can help in a circumstance like this. They all start with D because sometimes I like to come up with little frameworks and teaching points that help you remember things. So I'm going to give you 4 different D words that you can remember when you're feeling tired, exhausted. And this is different than being burnt out. We did a podcast on burnout a couple months ago. So go listen to that one if you haven't heard it yet, because I think it's really valuable, the conversation that we had, the kind of questions that I posed. But in my mind, something like what I'm experiencing right now is not burnout. I would not call this burnout because it's not a result of working too much. It's not a result of pushing too hard, anything like that. It's just a physical situation that is causing me to feel exhausted, and rest and time off and, just not working isn't necessarily the solution for the way I feel. So as I was mentioning before, because I don't know when this is going to end, and I know you guys have probably experienced this before, where you can't just put your life on hold indefinitely when you don't know when something is going to end, right? Like there's a big difference between taking a break from work, saying, okay, I just need like a week off to recover from some burnout and to kind of reassess what I'm doing to address this burnout, and then I can get back into it. It's a very different type of mindset than one where you literally don't know if there's any way to solve the fatigue or the exhaustion, and a week off isn't probably going to do it. And you just have to keep going. And sometimes there are times where we have to just keep going even when we're exhausted. And, I think being able to determine when you're burnt out versus when you're just tired because life or physical health challenges are causing tiredness, we have to know the difference, because I think there's certain things you're going to do differently when your fatigue is not solved by time off versus if something like burnout, if you do just need a break, and that could be helpful. Okay, so let me share these 4 Ds with you. And then once you've listened to this episode, I would love to hear from you where your head's at with this stuff. If this was valuable, this conversation we're about to have, if you have any thoughts about what's helped you get through challenging times, because I really want this to be a conversation. I love sharing my perspective with you guys, and hopefully you enjoy it too. I assume if you're listening, it means you do enjoy my perspective. But I also want to hear from you, because I do think, there's a lot of value in collaboration and community and a discussion about circumstances, especially in certain situations like the one I'm in, where there's other moms out there that have been through pregnancy, have been through birth, have been through the newborn phase, have been through toddler phase, all the different things that other women have been through that I'm going to be going through, and being able to have conversations about how they got through it can be so helpful. So I would love to hear from you if you've been through what I'm going through, if you've been through something similar, if you've been through something totally different, but a similar challenge to your business and your life, then I would love to hear from you and have a conversation about it. So definitely send me a DM on Instagram at Laura Schoenfeld RD so we can chat about it. Okay. So like I said, I have 4 Ds that can be actions we can take, or really just even mindsets that we can adopt when we're exhausted and we need to keep showing up for our business and our life. I mean, I know not everybody listening is a business owner. Most of you are. So I'm going to talk about this in the sense that, it's running a business and running a life. But I do think there's a ton of overlap, and a lot of the things that work for improving how you feel in your business can also work in your day-to-day life. So my first D that I recommend is delete. Delete is asking yourself, what can you remove from your life that doesn't have to be done? This is something that came up on our conversation about what to do when you're feeling overwhelmed. And again, that was a really great conversation. It was actually pulled from a coaching call with my Nutrition Business Accelerator students. So if you haven't listened to that one, I think it's a couple of episodes ago. Just look for the episode about what to do when you're feeling overwhelmed. what we talked about on that show or that episode is this idea that a lot of times the things that we're feeling overwhelmed by are things that we're choosing to do. Even me being pregnant and feeling like this and being exhausted by the physical, process of growing a baby, I chose to get pregnant, right? Like that was a decision. And even if I had gotten unintentionally pregnant, I still chose to have sex, right? Or to do the thing that would have led to me getting pregnant in the first place. So we can always find where our choice came into play when it comes to the things that we are doing and how we feel and, the things that we might feel overwhelmed by. And so the whole point of that conversation was to remind you guys that a lot of times, not always, because not every single experience of fatigue is a choice or related to a choice that you made, but sometimes it is. And a lot of times the things that are looming over us that we feel like we have to do, even though we're exhausted, are things that we've chosen to commit to. And a lot of times we're choosing things that don't need to be done. And need to be done is always kind of an interesting, personal definition because, as an example, I haven't been working out anywhere near as much as I used to before I got pregnant because of my energy levels. And because, if I have to choose between expending a bunch of energy exercising versus expending that same energy creating something to help my business function, right now, I'm going to choose helping the business function. Not that I don't want to work out, and anytime I have time and energy to possibly do it, I do it. But that's been something that, even though in theory, exercise is good, it's not a bad thing to do. It's not something that I, desire to pull out of my life. But when, I come into these situations where I have to choose where I'm putting my energy and, if I'm going to be like spending a half an hour working out, or if I'm going to do something that has to get done for my business, I might have to let go of the workout, right? So technically working out doesn't have to be done. Whereas for me, because I'm the sole breadwinner of my family, and if I don't do things in the business can't function, right? Like if I have to do a coaching call or put together a workshop for my clients, nobody else can do that, right? Like they can't really replace me as far as my team is concerned, or I can't just hire somebody else to make the content. I mean, in theory I could, but I'm probably not going to do that because that's not what my clients are paying me for. So those are the things that I've committed to that really I don't have a choice about doing. And so there's a lot of times where I have to choose to not do things that I do have a choice. Another example of this is things that you might feel obligated to do. So I've been a pretty active volunteer with my church since, I want to say 2015 was when we had our first services, end of 2015. And so, that was 6 years of pretty consistent volunteer work for my church. And it was something that I value, and our church needs the help. We're a church plant, so we have a pretty small volunteer staff. So losing a pretty solid volunteer like me is not the best thing for the church. It's definitely a difficult situation when they lose volunteers that are reliable and trustworthy. However, when I first got pregnant and I felt exhausted and sick and had to sleep a ton and all of that, I had to really put my foot down about my volunteer work with the church. And it was kind of awkward because there was a few weeks where I wasn't sharing with people that I was pregnant, but I had to basically be like, don't put me on the volunteer schedule. And I just said, for personal reasons, I'm not going to be able to volunteer at least until the end of the year. And I haven't been volunteering since I got pregnant. And that's an example of something where it took a little bit of uncomfortable conversation with the volunteer director, the one that was putting me on the schedule. And maybe it was only uncomfortable for me because, again, I didn't have a reason other than just personal reasons at the time. But I had to delete that commitment from my schedule in order to protect my own physical well-being, my ability to get the sleep that I needed, because when you volunteer with the church, usually we have to get up at like 5:30 in the morning on a Sunday to go help. And, for me, I need every ounce of sleep I can get. So I wasn't willing to commit to waking up that early. some of the days can be pretty long. We can end up being there for like 6-7 hours, and that's like almost a full work day just for a Sunday, right? So that was something that I was choosing to do. It's something that I value. It's something that is very important, but it did not have to be done. And it certainly didn't have to be done by me, right? Like there's other people that could fill in and they can find new volunteers. So making that decision and having that conversation was something that was part of my delete strategy. It was, okay, is there anything that I'm committing to spending energy and time on that I do not have to do, that I can take out of my schedule, at least until I'm feeling up for doing it? And again, who knows when that'll be? Probably not for at least another 4 or 5 months minimum, assuming, my baby is super chill and I get to sleep with a newborn, which, I know is probably not necessarily an assumption that most people want to make. But that's something that I would be looking at in your life. If there are things that you've committed to, whether it's in your business, in your personal life, that doesn't actually have to be done, and pulling that out, even if it's just temporarily, so that you do have the space in your schedule for rest, so that you don't expend your limited energy on the things that are not as important. I'm not saying I don't work out, but if I can get like 2 workouts in a week, 1 lifting, 1 Peloton, and then walk my dog most days, that's good enough for me at this stage of the game, right? And I don't have to be trying to force myself to squeeze extra workout time in. I don't know if it would benefit my energy. It's hard to say because, again, usually when I've done a workout, I'm relatively tired the next day. But that's a decision that I made, to delete those extra workouts out of my schedule so that I could have that energy to put towards the things that do have to be done. So just ask yourself, are there things that you've committed to that you don't actually have to stay committed to? I know that integrity is important, and doing the things that you say you're going to do is really one of the most important practices that we can engage in. But sometimes there are things that we have to drop, right? Like we're not superheroes. If we go through a situation in our life that's exhausting us, and again, this could be an illness, this could be pregnancy, it could be, like my husband was in the hospital last month and it was like all hands on deck helping him. So that was pretty tiring for me too. If stuff like that is going on in your life, there are going to be times where you have to drop things that you've committed to. And sometimes you're going to disappoint people. Sometimes people are going to have to make sacrifices or figure it out if you aren't able to do the things that you were committing to doing. But this is one of the most important things, because I do find that, especially if you're the kind of person that does stuff out of guilt or, feels bad if you back out of something that you've committed to, this could be a really important step to take when you're in a season of exhaustion and your energy is limited and you have to protect the small amount of energy that you do have for the things that you do have to do, and you get to decide what those things are. Okay, so that was the first D, is delete. Take the things out of your schedule in your life, at least temporarily, that do not have to be done, to really conserve your energy for the things that do. Now, sometimes you want to take things out, but they still have to get done. And that's where our second D, which is delegation, can come in. So what it means to delegate is to look for somebody else that can do the work that has to be done. There are going to be things in your life that, even though they need to be done by somebody, that they don't have to be done by you. As an example, I have a housekeeper that comes pretty much once a week, pretty consistently. And she actually works really fast. It's kind of nuts. She's here for 2 hours and she does our laundry. She does any dishes that we have in the sink. She does like a general clean of our whole living space. It's not our entire house because we have a few rooms that don't really get used, or like my office, she doesn't come into when I'm working in here. But she'll vacuum, she'll, clean off tabletops, that kind of thing. And like I said, she does our laundry, which honestly, the laundry piece is probably the most valuable thing that she does, because laundry is a great example of something that has to get done. Like I guess technically we could walk around with dirty, gross smelling clothes, but we're probably not going to do that, right? So laundry has to get done, but it doesn't have to get done by me. And in theory, my husband could be doing it. He does work part-time for the business now. He also does part-time volunteer work for our church. So he's not technically full-time, but a lot of what he's doing during the week is stuff that isn't necessarily stuff we want to outsource, like grocery shopping or cooking, for example. So having somebody to come do the laundry once a week, and when we have our baby, it might bump up to twice a week if we have a ton of stuff that needs cleaned, which I've heard that babies use a lot of laundry. Having somebody come do that just makes this, I don't know how to explain it other than when you walk downstairs and you see your house is clean, you go into your bedroom and your laundry bin is empty and all your clothes that were in there are washed and put away. There is something very relieving about that experience. And to know that I'm not then going to, after spending a lot of energy working, that I'm not then going to have to spend more energy doing laundry and dishes, which I do not have to be the one that does that. And like I said, my housekeeper comes once a week for 2 hours. And we pay her $50 a visit. And so for me as a business owner in particular, I can easily find a way to make $50 a week that I can spend that time earning money instead of spending time doing something that is a $50 total task. Not even $50 an hour, $50 total to get something done. If I even spend an hour doing something that's worth $50 in our household, it's probably worth delegating to somebody else. So I actually really like to delegate home stuff first, because a lot of times the home stuff, you can find somebody local that can help you, and it doesn't have to be this like super specialized role. You don't really have to train them or manage them. Like with my housekeeper, I did train her on how to, do what we needed done in our house, but I don't have to manage her, right? Like she's been working with us it's been over 2 years, because I'm pretty sure she started working for us before COVID hit. And she just knows what she needs to do when she gets here. So it literally takes no energy from me for her to come and do her job and take care of the home stuff that needs to be done. And that takes more energy leaking off of my plate. So that's why I really like home stuff, because again, when you're running a business, a lot of times the stuff that you delegate for your business needs some oversight. And I'm not saying it's not worth it, because I definitely am a huge proponent of hiring for your business. But I think sometimes entrepreneurs especially underestimate the value of getting help at home. And they think, oh, my first hire needs to be a VA or somebody that can, be my office assistant or something like that. And I actually really think you should be looking at what could I take off my plate at home first, especially knowing that training and managing a team member for your business is probably going to be more time consuming for you than getting somebody to do things like laundry, dishes, house cleaning, that kind of thing. In your business, delegation is huge too. I will say with the current season that I'm in, I am so grateful that I had the foresight to get my team growth happening before I got pregnant. And honestly, this was a big thing that even prevented me from getting pregnant in the first place, or at least attempting to get pregnant, because we were basically not allowing me to get pregnant until I got pregnant, basically. But I spent at least 6 months with the current team that I have. And one of my main team members, Becca, who some of you may know if you're in one of my programs, she started working for me really pretty much right after the pandemic started. I think it was like 3 or 4 months later. So she had been working with me for over a year by the time I got pregnant. And so between that and then also my husband choosing to leave his teaching career to help me in the business, help me at home, that kind of thing, we were making these changes and preparing for the possibility that I would be getting pregnant in 2021 months in advance. I know that not everybody can plan stuff ahead like this. And sometimes stuff happens with my husband's surgery. I think it was 5 days after we found out he needed surgery that he was under the knife. So we wouldn't have necessarily had time to scramble together a team in that situation. But I've been working on team building it's going to be close to 2 years now. And It's something that I think all entrepreneurs should be thinking about because, again, as I mentioned before, if you're not in a season like I'm in right now, you're probably going to be in one at some point. And you don't want to wait until you're in that season of exhaustion and feeling like you don't have the energy to do everything that needs to be done to then start trying to hire a team. So I know not everybody's ready for a team member. If you just started your business, you probably need to get some stuff off the ground first before you hire somebody. But one of my mentors always says the reason why you can't afford to hire somebody is because you haven't hired yet. And I agree with that in a lot of different ways. If you're somebody who has a lot going on in your business and you're spending your time doing a lot of lower value tasks, not low value necessarily, although, I would look at things like answering emails and scheduling clients and stuff to be a relatively low value task because it's not something that you need to be doing. But anything that's in your business that could be done by someone else who's not you is something that I consider a lower value task. And many of you are probably ready to hire somebody in your business, even if it's just a VA to help with some basic things like maybe it's making designs for your Instagram page, or maybe it's sending emails out to your audience, or maybe it's scheduling patients or clients. There's a lot of different things an assistant can do that you can train them how to do relatively simply, and that can clear up a ton of time in your schedule and make sure that your business is still running even when you are physically incapacitated, like I have been many times in the last few months. So I am so grateful that I started building the team well before we got pregnant, and my team has been pretty indispensable for me with all the stuff that we're doing. Our last launch of the MBA program would not have happened if I didn't have the support from my team. As many of you know, especially if you're one of my MBA students, we literally were I was helping my husband in the hospital the same time I was running my launch for that program. So as you can imagine, I definitely needed help during that time, and having my team members there to support me and help me get things done. And they had enough experience with me that it wasn't just throwing them under the bus trying to help them do the things that I'm doing or would normally be doing. They had enough runway where, there was probably some nerves or some stuff that got dropped or whatever, but it wasn't just this hectic throw them in and they have no idea what's going on kind of experience. We had been planning for that support for a while. And yes, we weren't planning on my husband having a surgery, but my team member was able to step up and step in more than I even thought she was going to need to when that specific challenge hit. So really, if you're an entrepreneur and you're beyond that intro stage, if you have clients, you don't have to be full, you don't have to be on a wait list, but if you have clients and if you have some kind of content creation strategy to find new clients, whether that's blogging, podcasting, social media, anything like that, getting help with that sooner rather than later is so, so important, especially if you are having good energy. And this would be a good time to train somebody so that if something in the future happens that your energy is not as good, or you're distracted, or you're pulled away, that person can fill in for you and you're not just, shutting the business down essentially to deal with life stuff. So that's our second D, is to delegate. It can be business, it can be home. For some of you, hiring somebody at home might come easier, and maybe that would be where you want to spend your time first. For others, you are ready to hire somebody in your business, and learning how to do that would be a really good use of your time. We teach our clients how to do that inside of our NBA Next Level program. We have a little bit on hiring in our NBA program as a little bonus lesson, but we go into more detail and in depth in our NBA Next Level program because those are the people generally who are ready to start hiring, or the ones that already have their core offers created, that they already have a sales process, that they're already working on growing their audience, and they can bring someone in to support those activities. So our second D is delegate. Our third D for how to keep showing up for your business, even when you're exhausted, is to decide. Decide is interesting because I find that one of the hardest things that my MBA students struggle with is making decisions and being able to move forward with that decision, being committed to that decision and not wavering on that decision, not second guessing that decision, not seeing what other people are doing and saying, oh, maybe my decision wasn't right, but really being able to just make a decision and go with it. So the question you can ask yourself here is, what is the most important thing that you can spend your time doing? And can you just stick to that? Because I do think we waste a ton of time and energy worrying if we can be, or if we should be doing things a certain way, rather than just committing to a plan and sticking to it. I know I am very, very prone to this. It's probably one of my biggest Achilles heels is this whole like shiny object syndrome and always wanting to do something new. It's probably the entrepreneur in me, which there's pros to that, especially when you're first starting your business. But once you get into a phase like I'm in where you're running a team and you're scaling and that kind of thing, a lot of times that wanting to start new things all the time energy is not super helpful. And if you're in a season like what I'm in right now, that energy is not there. I don't really have a lot of start something new energy. Now, that could be because got a lot of new stuff being created inside of my belly. I think that would be probably a big part of it. And I do think that there is some, wisdom to pulling back in a season where you're pregnant, if that is something that you guys ever go through. But right now, my start something new energy is definitely not what it normally would be, which maybe is a good thing. Maybe it's a good thing to practice staying the course, being consistent, and not having to like do new things all the time. But I do find that a lot of my MBA students, and not just MBA students, even some of my students who are more advanced, like our next level clients, we've seen this in our mastermind before, where a lot of energy gets wasted around not making a decision. So there's a few options. There isn't really necessarily an option that's the best thing that you're like, yeah, this is absolutely what I want to do. And you're questioning, well, what's the right thing? What's the best thing? How should I be spending my energy? We're going through that right now in our business, especially with me getting so close to my maternity leave, only having, if things go well, we have like 3 months or less to when the baby comes, and I have to be making decisions around how are we spending that time? What's the best use of our time? What's the best use of my time? What do I need to be focusing on that needs other things taken off my plate so that I can focus on those things? These are the kind of conversations I'm having with my team, because one of the things that they help me with is making sure that I am not overcommitting and then burning out and then not getting things done the way they need to get done, or, just being totally exhausted by the stuff that I've committed to. So for me, a lot of energy management has come down to making decisions about what I am putting my energy towards and being okay with putting things off. Because we have a lot of different things that we want to do in our business. We have a pretty diverse audience, even though we focus on nutrition entrepreneurs. We don't only work with nutritionists. We work with personal trainers. We work with, we have a couple speech language pathologists in our program this time. And we're thinking about expanding to just more wellness businesses in general, because we realize that our process that we teach our nutritionist clients works for pretty much any sort of wellness, whether it's physical wellness, mental wellness, like life wellness, any sort of wellness coaching or consulting kind of business. So because of that, because of our awareness that, hey, we have this stuff that could actually work with a lot more people, there's a lot of temptation to pile on a bunch of other projects before my maternity leave. And we've had to be really, really careful about not doing that. So basically, this desire to do these things in my brain, I'm like, okay, this would be great. This would be so good for our audience. They would really love this. This would really help them. This would be exactly what a lot of them are looking for. And I might have to put that on the back burner while I'm in this current season of fatigue and lack of energy to do projects. It is frustrating. It's frustrating to have that experience. It's frustrating to want to create stuff, want to work on stuff, and have all these ideas about things that we could be doing to grow our business, but also have to just decide, okay, what are we focusing on right now and what are we not focusing on right now? And I do think learning how to make quick decisions and commit to those decisions is a skill that can really help anyone who's running a business to be a better business owner and a better CEO, and somebody who can keep the energy flowing in a single direction and not scattering it across a bunch of different projects. Because that is something that when we're low on energy, we have to be really careful that we're not expending energy in a lot of different ways. We want to use that energy that we have and concentrate it and really focus it in on maybe just like one or two projects at a time. Like I know for me, we try to pick 1 to 2 total things to focus on for each quarter. And we're coming to the end of Q1, about to start Q2. And for me, my due date is just after Q2 ends. So pretty much we have one more quarter to devote time and energy and effort to a project or two before the baby comes and before I'm off for a couple of months. And so we have to make these decisions. We have to say, this is what we're focusing on and this is what we're not going to do right now. And maybe never. Maybe we'll never do it. Or maybe we'll do it at the end of the year. Maybe we'll do it next year. But we have to make those decisions and we have to stick to those decisions. And a lot of the conversations I've had with my key team members is around, okay, what are we spending that time on? What are we focusing on? What project are we committing to? And which ones are we not? So that's where that decide factor comes into play. Because again, I do think we can waste a ton of energy circling around those decisions or second guessing those decisions. Like if I decide I want to focus on a particular offer that we want to grow in the next 3 months, but then I'm also like, well, but I don't know, maybe that's not the best offer and maybe I should do this one instead, or maybe we can do both, or maybe we can do these 3 different things. That's where all of that energy, that mental energy starts to get depleted. And so it's actually really interesting. This is something that just occurred to me that I actually studied in my undergrad training. I did psychology as an undergrad, and I did an honors thesis, which was an optional thing we could do to graduate with honors. I did my honors thesis on self-control and decision fatigue and how that actually can affect, like using your self-control can actually affect your ability to keep using it. Actually, part of my research was on how mindfulness makes us have more energy. So that could be its whole own podcast. But basically, if we're spending a lot of energy making decisions, there's literally a term called decision fatigue. If we spend a lot of energy in just the decision process, we will have less energy to actually then expend on the execution of that decision. That's just pretty much guaranteed. It's very well established in the psychology field that happens. It's one of the reasons why when we walk into a grocery store, it can be, unless you're, if you just love food and you love grocery stores, maybe this isn't the greatest example, but if you work with clients, a lot of times they get exhausted by going into grocery stores because there's so many decisions to make, right? Like just looking at the yogurt aisle with like 18,000 different yogurt choices. It's like, unless you just know, okay, I'm going to go get this one thing. Like I know when we get yogurt, there's like one type of yogurt that I typically like. And my husband does the grocery shopping, so he just knows to go get that one. There's not a lot of decision fatigue because we're not looking at the literal like entire one wall of the grocery store covered in yogurt. But that's the same thing with our business. If we're looking at a wall of options and we have all of these different things that we could choose from, and we're spending all this time making the decision and questioning the decision, we then do not have the energy that we need to take action. So I really want to emphasize this because this is something I've been learning for a couple years now. There's been a few really helpful books. One's called The One Thing. Another one is called Essentialism. I'm blanking on the third one. I don't remember what that one was called. If I think of it, I'll have to share it with you guys. But there's one other book that I recommend in my MBA program for that concept of essentialism. And it's the idea that we actually are way more productive and can achieve more when we limit our focus to very few things, if not like the one thing, right? The one thing that we're focusing on is where we get the best results. So this is something where, especially in a season of tiredness, like what I'm experiencing and maybe what you either are or will experience at some point, being able to be decisive and focus on the thing that matters and to make the decision to drop the other stuff and maybe come back to it later, maybe never come back to it. That ability to make that decision quickly and without circling it for days or weeks or months is going to definitely help with minimizing how much energy is being drained out of your limited resource pool. Okay, so our final D, we've gone through 3 so far: delete, delegate, and decide. Our final D is drop, and that stands for drop the resistance. This one is definitely probably the hardest for me. I'm the kind of person that likes to take action and fix problems and figure things out. And there's definitely benefits to that, right? Like being able to problem solve is a huge skill that has made a huge difference in my business. However, in this current season, with the current way that things are going in my life and in my business, a lot of it actually is not solvable. Like the problems that we're experiencing or the problems that I'm experiencing individually are not solvable. Me being exhausted, yeah, like I've messed around with my food, my sleep, my exercise, what I'm doing during the day, how I'm setting up my schedule. I've tweaked that stuff to ideally maximize my energy at any given moment. But the fact of the matter is, like, there's a certain amount of fatigue I have that I literally cannot control at all, literally no impact on. And that's been really tough for me because, again, being somebody who is a problem solver and likes to take action and fix things and figure it out, having an unsolvable problem like this has been pretty frustrating. I'm not going to lie. And if you're anything like me, maybe you've had that experience too, where you couldn't fix a problem. There was no solution and you just had to drop the resistance to it. So resistance is usually mental. It can be physical, but typically in this kind of situation, it's going to be mental resistance. And for me, and maybe it's for you too, that resistance shows up as wanting it to be different and being frustrated by it, being angry about how I feel, being sad about how I feel, being, tired of being tired, right? It's like, not only am I tired, but I'm also emotionally tired of being tired. And that is all resistance. And that takes energy. So a lot of times when we're experiencing a phase or a season in our life that we are tired and we don't have the energy that we want to have to do the things that we want to do, there's a lot of surrender and release that has to happen. And trust me when I say I am not a big fan of surrender. It's a practice that I am learning and practicing and trying to get better at. But it's taking time because, again, for most of my life, if I saw a problem, I tackled it head on and figured out how to solve it. So the idea of just surrendering to circumstances that are unpleasant or undesirable is not easy for me. But it is really important. And it's something that you might also struggle with if you're anything like me. And something that came to my mind, I think it was even just today when I was preparing for this podcast, was the idea that a lot of times, especially as entrepreneurs, we're always focused on growth and progress and, getting bigger and better results, more clients, more money, more impact, more audience, more podcast listens, more blog traffic hits, all the stuff, right? We're always thinking about how can we grow. And, there's some positives to that, right? Like there is always value in tracking growth and focusing on growing a certain area of your business. And a lot of times if we're not paying attention to growth, we don't just accidentally grow, right? So I think having a growth mindset, a growth focus is super, super valuable. And there are seasons where we actually have to be okay with either slow progress or, and this is the one that I thought of this morning that I was like, oh, I don't really love this, but being okay with the idea that maybe there's going to be some steps backward. Like that's something that for me with my business, we've been on a growth trajectory for pretty much every year. I'm trying to think if we've ever, and I'm talking about revenue here. It's a little bit of an easier number to track, right? If you look at the entire year and how much money you brought in, it's a very easy way to track your growth. It's not always the best way to track your growth or the only way to track your growth, but as a business, it's good to see financial growth, usually. And so looking back, I'm pretty sure I'd have to confirm this with tax records or something, but I'm pretty sure we've grown in our revenue every single year since I started my business back in 2014. And for me this year, even talking with my personal mentor, as many of you know, I'm in James Wedmore's mastermind, and he and I have talked about my goals. and, figured out what exactly am I focusing on this year other than just bringing new life into the world. And so for me, part of it was saying, okay, well, maybe my goal is to just maintain our revenue without me having to work as much and being able to take off 2 to 3 months from work for a maternity leave, which honestly, that would actually be growth. If I could take a quarter of the year off and we could still make the exact same amount of money, that's technically growth in our business. And what I was thinking about today, looking at the next 3 months and thinking, okay, like what are we going to work on? And then how long am I going to be out for? Because that's another thing is now I'm trying to think, okay, how many weeks do I really want to just block off for this maternity leave? Knowing that I can always reduce it if I want to, but I have to make the effort to block it off now because otherwise it'll create itself, right? Like your schedule, if you don't make it yourself, it'll turn into something you don't want it to turn into. So making those decisions around the next 3 to 6 months, I had to really come to grips with the possibility that our business may shrink this year. And I'm not saying it has to, right? Like it's March right now. We got a long year ahead of us. There is a lot of stuff that can happen in the second half of this year. There's a lot of stuff that can happen in the last couple of months of this year. I'm a big proponent of, believing that anything's possible. And so I'm not saying this to predict our future. I'm saying this because there had to be this like emotional release that I had around the idea that my business has to grow every year. And that's hard as somebody who is growth oriented, has had growth year after year for, what is this, year 8 in our business. And you're used to that and that's what you're pursuing. And, I'm working with coaches and in a mastermind that the goal is to grow and improve performance and to have that realization that, hey, there's a chance that we may actually shrink, quote unquote, this year. And being okay with that was something that I definitely realized I have to reckon with when it comes to the emotional toll that it might take on me to believe that if I don't grow, that means I'm failing. So I would honestly be really curious if any of you have ever felt this way, because if you're an entrepreneur and you run your own business, chances are you're somebody who is, in pursuit of growth and achievement in a lot of areas of your life. And that idea that you might actually lose some of that progress because of life circumstances and being okay with that and letting that be okay. Like, I don't know how else to say it other than it has to be okay. That's something that can really affect how you emotionally handle a season of fatigue. Because again, I don't know when this is going to end. And then maybe you're in the same boat where you don't know when your fatigue is going to end. You don't know when you're going to have more energy to devote to your business. And there might be some things that you have to do with your goals where you cut them down or you're willing to take some steps back in your business to allow yourself to get through this season that you're currently getting through. And again, that idea of resistance creating more of an energy suck on you means that the more we can just accept our circumstances the way that they are, the less energy we're going to waste trying to fight them. And like I said, this is probably of the 4 Ds, the one that I struggle with the most. I'm pretty good at deleting things, getting a lot better at delegating stuff. Making quick decisions and sticking with it has been a skill that I've been building for close to a decade now. Probably more if I think about, life in general, but in my business, close to a decade. But for me, dropping the resistance and surrendering to the possibility that I won't reach my goals, that, will actually take steps back instead of steps forward, that the things I want to do, I can't do right now. That for me is the biggest challenge that I've been going through. And it honestly applies to other areas of life as well. Like I mentioned, the fitness thing, I like being strong. I like being active. I like going on long walks with my husband and my dog. I like lifting weights. And the last 5 months, hardly being able to do that, feeling my body change, feeling myself get weaker. My weight's gone up for obvious reasons. Of course, it's going to. But I feel like I've lost muscle mass. I don't care as much about that because it's not as important to me as financially supporting my family and my team and the people that I'm paying. But that's another area of life where it's like, wow, I'm literally like getting weaker and less fit. and I just have to be okay with it. So it's the same thing with business. Again, anything can happen, and I'm not predicting what the future is going to be, but there is that part of me that's like, maybe we won't do the same revenue that we did last year. And that's okay. It's not a huge deal. It's not the end of the world if you don't grow every single year. And even if we do grow, like the likelihood that we're going to have this like quantum leap year this year is not super high. I mean, again, anything's possible, but even if our progress is really slow, being okay with that and letting that be something that's just what this year is going to be. And we'll figure it out. And when we have the baby, it'll, be something we have to figure out. What does that look like? Being pregnant is one thing, but having a baby is another. And there's probably going to be a lot of changes that have to happen to the business. And I still think, knowing what I've seen other women accomplish in entrepreneurship, I still think we can grow even in these unique circumstances or these challenging circumstances. But, ultimately, a lot of what I'm talking about here is the emotional resistance and the emotional tie to growth and progress as being like, oh, if we're not doing that, then I am a failure, or the business is failing, or, I'm not living up to my potential, the kind of stories that can come up when we're experiencing those particular outcomes. So I didn't know how long this episode would be, but it's funny. Whenever I jump on these solos, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll talk for half an hour or something. And then you get me going. And here we are at about an hour. So I'm going to wrap things up because I could probably keep talking. And, I want to let you guys get to your day and chew on what you learned in the last hour. So just as a little recap, we talked about 4 different Ds that you can implement to help you keep showing up for your business and your life, even when you're exhausted and you have no idea when that exhaustion is going away. The first is delete. So looking to remove things from your life that don't have to be done. Delegate, which means finding someone else to do the work that does have to be done, but doesn't have to be done by you. Decide, which is figuring out what is the most important thing you can spend your time doing and being okay with putting some stuff on the back burner or, not getting it all done in the time that you want to do it. And then drop the resistance. So identifying the emotional resistance we have around even those 3 Ds, getting rid of stuff, choosing what you're going to focus on, handing it off to other people, any sort of resistance we have about doing any of those things. And then also the resistance that we have about some of the changes we might have to accept in our life in any given season, slowing down, reducing how fast you're making progress, maybe taking some steps backwards even, being able to release the emotional judgment around that and surrender to the current season that you're in is something that can help a ton. And as I mentioned, is very hard to do, but I think it's valuable practice to be able to do those kind of things and not have this, I should be doing this. I wish I could be doing this. I hate that I feel this way. Those kind of emotionally draining thoughts that are really easy to fall into. I, speaking from experience, have thought a lot of those things in the last 5 months. Just being able to accept that, hey, this is the circumstance. I can't fix it. I can't change it. I'm going to accept that this is the way things are. I'm going to do what I can do and make decisions around what that is and not overexert myself in this season. But I'm okay with slowing down, taking some steps backwards, or, taking longer to achieve certain things than I would like. So those are my ideas for how to deal with a situation or a circumstance where your energy is low and there's nothing you can really do about it. I might have to do a podcast on, when energy is low because of your choices, because we all know that can definitely be the case as well. But there are times in your life where your energy is low because of circumstances that are out of your control, and being able to handle that season of your life in the best way possible, I think is worth learning how to do, because if you can run your business when your energy is depleted, then just imagine the kind of success you can have when your energy comes back to a higher level. So as I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, I would love to continue the conversation with you about this topic. It's definitely something that's been on my mind a ton this year, and I'm sure will continue to be on my mind for the next several months, if not longer. So I'd love to hear from you what I talked about today that resonated. If you have any thoughts about how you've gotten through fatiguing periods of your life or if you're in one currently. I just want to have the opportunity to have some dialogue around this because I do think it's something that a lot of people struggle with, and I think we need to talk about it more, especially in the entrepreneur space. So I hope that this has been valuable for you. I've really enjoyed sharing my thoughts about this with all of you listeners, and I'll look forward to seeing you here next week on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody. Are you a nutritionist or dietitian struggling to figure out how much to charge for your programs and services? Maybe you've heard that as a nutritionist, you should just charge what you're worth. But this way of thinking can cause you to either undercharge your clients or work yourself into the ground trying to earn your worth. As a healthcare provider, you can't set up a pricing structure that forces you to sacrifice your own health and well-being in the name of your business and your clients. But I promise it doesn't have to be this way. When you download my free profit planning workbook, I'll walk you step by step through the 10-step process for determining the right pricing for your nutrition business. As a nutritionist, you have the power to completely change someone's life for the better. There's huge value in that, so it's time to stop underselling what you do. By following along with this worksheet, you can determine exactly what you need to charge to achieve your revenue goals with ease. I'll teach you everything I've learned about pricing from growing my own nutrition business to over $250,000 in revenue annually and helping other dietitian and nutrition entrepreneurs hit their first $10,000 to $30,000 months and beyond. To get your free workbook, go to lauraschoenfeld.com/profit, PROFIT, and grab your copy today, so you no longer have to wonder how to set the right rates for your incredibly valuable nutrition services. That's lauraschoenfeld.com/profit. It's time to make the money that you deserve as a nutritionist, and I can't wait to help you get there.